Hey, good afternoon. Let's talk about the Dawes Act. In 1887, Congress passed the Dawes Act, which was formerly called the General Allotment Act. But to understand what it really was, you have to understand the mindset behind it. The Dawes Act was not simply a land policy, it was an assimilation policy. By the late 1800s, the United States had already fought wars against indigenous nations, forced removals like the Trail of Tears, confined tribes to reservations, and broken countless numbers of treaties. But communal land ownership was still intact, and that was a problem for the federal government, because under most tribal systems, land was held collectively. Clans stewarded it, nations governed it, families occupied it, but individuals did not own it in the European legal sense. To the U.S. government, communal land meant two things. Number one, it could not be easily sold, and number two, it could not be easily taxed. That land, millions of acres, was locked inside sovereign tribal systems. The Dawes Act was designed to unlock that. And here's how it worked. Reservation lands would be divided into individual parcels called allotments, typically 160 acres to the head of the household, 80 acres to single adults, and 40 acres to minors. After allotments were assigned, everything left over was declared surplus. That surplus land was then opened to white settlement, or the colonizer. So while the public story said this will make indigenous people landowners, the practical result was this will free up millions of acres for colonization. Between 1887 and 1934, indigenous landholdings dropped from 130 million acres to 48 million acres. That's 90 million acres stolen, not through open war, but through policy. But there was another layer. The Dawes Act also required that allotments be held in trust by the federal government for 25 years. That meant indigenous people did not receive full legal title immediately. The U.S. government held the land in trust. During that period, the allottee was expected to become, quote-unquote, civilized, meaning adopt farming, Christianity, and Euro-American social norms. After 25 years, if the government decided that the individual was competent, they would then receive full title and U.S. citizenship. If not, the land could remain under federal control. Citizenship was conditional, land ownership was conditional, recognition was conditional, all based on federal evaluation. The Dawes Act was rooted in a belief system popular at the time called civilization policy. That idea was that tribal governments were obstacles, communal landholdings was backwards, indigenous identity needed to be broken down into individuals. If you dissolve the tribe into individuals, you dissolve the nation. If you dissolve the nation, you eliminate the treaty partner. That was the deeper legal strategy behind allotment. Once land is owned individually instead of collectively, it can be sold, taxed, foreclosed on, and inherited fractionally until it becomes unusable, and it can be lost. That's exactly what happened. Many allottees were declared competent and had restrictions removed early. Their land became taxable. Tax debts mounted and land was seized. Others were defrauded. Speculators bought allotments. Guardianship systems were abused. Within a few decades, tribal land bases were shattered. Now here's a critical connection. Before allotment could occur, the government had determined who qualified to receive land. That requirement was enrollment. The required roles, the required racial categorization, and that's why the Dawes Rolls were not a side issue. They were an enforcement mechanism of the Dawes Act. No role replacement, no allotment, no land. So when agents separated family members into different racial categories, they weren't just labeling them. They were determining land distribution, inheritance rights, political identity, future citizenship, and generational wealth. The Dawes Act was not accidental. It was a structural solution to what the federal government called the Indian problem. Break up the land, break up the tribes, absorb the individuals, and open the rest to settlement or to the colonizer. And then came the Curtis Act in 1898. And that went even further to abolish tribal lands and identity. Courts and governments in Indian Territory ensuring there would be no institutional resistance left to challenge the allotment process. And by the time Oklahoma became a state in 1907, tribal sovereignty in that region had been legally hollowed out. The Dawes Act did not simply divide land, it re-engineered identity, citizenship, governance, and economic survival. It replaced nationhood with eligibility, and it replaced kinship with paperwork. And once identity was fixed on a federal roll, future generations would be judged by that line on a page. That's why understanding what the Dawes Act really was matters, because it was never just about the land. It was about restructuring sovereignty itself. If you want to learn more about this and learn how to reclaim your sovereignty, your land, your identity, you have to do your genealogy, and I can help you with that. Bloodlines and Belonging. It's a step-by-step guide on how to do your genealogy. It gives you everything you need, websites. It gives you advice on how to go about finding your family's history. So I'm going to put the link in the captions. I hope you guys go pick it up. It can help you a lot. You guys have a great day.